Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where it was corner conundrums in front of the Cup, capitalised on by Linfield, which ended Portadown's hope of a fairy tale end to their spirited Cup run. We look back at NIFL's big day, where the Blues reclaim their second League Cup on the bounce. But can they stop Larne from repeating the same trick with the Gibson Cup, after their slip up against Coleraine was music to the ears of the other title challengers? Elsewhere, Glens fans are calling for sweeping changes following another poor day for them at the Oval, while Crusaders could only be days away from signposting their big next step by announcing their new manager. Strap yourself in, because it's set to be another stormer weekly edition of Kicking Match on the way. Definitely one of those weeks where I could have ran straight in front of this microphone, just minutes after the final whistle blew in some of those games, and start chatting about it. Because from the League Cup final to some of the twists and turns that we saw at the top of the league, at the bottom of the league, all the news stories which have emerged from Glentoran and Crusaders since, I'm not gonna lie to you, feels like a pretty big week. Therefore, may as well get my guest in right now, here to dissect it all. It is sports journalist with the Belfast Telegraph. Welcome back, Stuart McKinley.
Hello, Peter. Nice to be back.
I'm glad that you're back. This is a really interesting week to have you back, because we've got the Cup final to talk about. The Blues, Linfield, they retained the trophy. They did it pretty much at a canter. Reviewing the final now, you look at that whole lead up to the final, and everything was centered around this potential Cinderella story of Portadown. It was their first time back in a final for a number of years. Just with the cherry on top of a dreadful couple of years that the clubs went through. They brought plenty of fans to the National Stadium. They were loud, they were boisterous, they had a goal to celebrate, but unfortunately not enough. Linfield win out 3-1. And it probably feels like, despite all the occasion, the fire and all the nice things around the final, it was very much just another afternoon for Linfield, who never really got out of second gear, but still had plenty enough to win the trophy.
Yeah, it was fairly routine in the end for Linfield. We got a good day out. We got an entertaining final. We got great colour at Windsor Park. Credit to the fans for making it an occasion, and credit to NIFL, who have made it the showpiece that it's become over the last few years. It was always a good final, but and not everybody would be in favour of the Sunday final. But I think it's been a good move by NIFL, a good day, and Linfield got the job done as they quite regularly do, and walked off with the trophy. And that's not to say they didn't deserve it. It was very much deserved by them on the day for their performance.
Let's actually mention NIFL in all this, because I do think you make a good point. I talked about it online in the lead up to Sunday, and NIFL have really put a lot behind this final. It's their competition. It's the League Cup ran by NIFL, like the league, and we've seen over the recent years where they've really jacked up their digital presence, what they do on social media. And we saw last year with the Coleraine Linfield final that they were putting a big push behind it for everybody to go out. It was a big day, and they've really tried to make this game, this final, to be the most attended game of the season. If the Boxing Day game between Linfield and Glentoran isn't at Windsor Park, they really try to push this to get 5 figures in, make it a big showpiece final. There's really only a bit of silverware and pride on the line, with Irish Cup. It still has the far bigger heritage. You still have a route into Europe there, but having it this late into the season still, and all the pump they get into it, I think this final and this game means a lot more than it ever has, because if you get into the final, you're going to see it plastered all over online in the weeks in the lead up. And perhaps it maybe helps when you have a team like Portadown, who have just been, in their fans' eyes, probably starved, and you probably saw that with the rollout of their fans. They really went for it in that final. I think they've done a really excellent job, and you especially compare that to the Irish Cup. And I'm not here to criticise the IFA, but you got to give credit where credit's due. NIFL came around, maybe they got to 10 years ago, and they said, we're going to come in, we're going to try and push the league, and it's going to be better as an outside entity to do this. And as this private proponent of the league. I think the League Cup and all the build up to the final shows how valuable they can be.
It's NIFL's day. That's the chance for them to showcase to a wider audience what they do and what the league is about. And they, like I say, they've done well. Particularly those last 3 years, the Sunday final, I think, has made a difference. Being on Sky, I've got friends in England who I'm always plugging the Sky games to, and one who I didn't plug the final to yesterday actually messaged me just before half time because he turned on the TV getting ready for the build up to the big live Premier League game, Liverpool and Manchester City, and he discovered that Linfield and Portadown was on before that, and he was very much enjoying the game until 2 goals went in quite quickly, and maybe he probably realised then that was the game done.
Let's chat about the game. Linfield were coming in massive favourites. They're the team that had been leading the entire top flight for months and months, and yes, that's fallen away ever so slightly recently, but they've still got a team of full-time professionals. And when I saw both team sheets, I think the thing that stood out to me was Cooper started, which I think was going to be big, and in the end he didn't really look at full strength, but then this is a player who's been injured for a number of weeks, so he still showed what he could do. But this is a player that needs to build himself up, get a bit more game time behind it. But that was a big moment. I think we knew this anyway. There was going to be no Ethan McGee in there. Chris Shields was injured. So there was the young guns, Annette and Archer, starting along that spine, and Miller was out wide and all the rest. But I think for Linfield, they had to play their game very simply. They just had to make sure they didn't get caught out by this Portadown team who like to play on the counter and kind of use that big pitch to their advantage. They did that. They really worked this Portadown team hard, and for the first, whatever it was, 35, 38 minutes, Portadown got away with a few scares, but they stood up to this Linfield side and were happy to take on the pressure, hoping that a long ball to Barr or Mays or Fife was going to be the thing that unlocked them. And you know what? There was a few chances. They were kind of scattergun and a bit frenetic, but they came close to having a real threat on goal in that first half. But then, of course, ultimately they were the architects of their own downfall. I think if you talk to any Portadown fans, they've been disappointed with them defensively this season. It's probably one of the main reasons why they're not dominating that championship. But it's from a corner, which is something you never want to concede from. They don't attack the ball, and it goes 1-0 Linfield. And at that point, it's get in at halftime 1-0 and regroup. But then there was another corner, probably a needless one in their eyes. It's an OG and 2-0 going into the half. They had a mountain to climb. That must have been massively frustrating if you're a fan of Portadown, because as much as Linfield looked professional and alert, they were not ripping shreds out of Portadown. Portadown were standing up and surviving.
I watched Niall Curry's interviews or read his interviews after the game with quite a bit of interest. And I know where he's coming from when he said that the game plan had worked for 40 minutes because it was 0-0 at that stage, and that's all maybe they could expect. But let's be honest, it could have been 2 or 3 by that stage. Fitzpatrick could have had a hat trick. He heads one over the bar. He had one ruled out for offside. He hit the post with an overhead kick, and he put one wide without being too critical anyway of Matthew Fitzpatrick. I think that's the difference between him and some of the classic Linfield strikers. The days gone by, Peter Thompson, Glenn Ferguson, Martin McGackie have a hat trick by that stage, and the game's over. I think the first 2 were what you might call nothing goals. Goals that could have been dealt with better, and that's where the disappointment and frustration will be for Portadown. But that's what good teams do. They pressure you, and momentary lapses in concentration then let them in. Half time, maybe Niall gets them in, tries to rally them, and thinks if we get the next goal, it's big. If they get that early, it starts to give them momentum. But even if they get one back after 80 minutes, you then see them throwing the kitchen sink. But the third goal then really killed any hope of Portadown building up a head of steam in the second half, and take away any chances of getting a win. The third goal was a really, really well worked move, and Rhys Annette is someone I've seen a few times, and he has a real knack of finding space in the box and he did so to get himself a tap in. I've been saying that he's 19, but it's hard to believe that he's 19 because he looks a little bit older than 19.
There's something grizzled about him, isn't there?
Yeah, there is definitely. but he also seems to have like the instincts of a veteran striker, just to find space, and that's a fantastic attribute to have as a striker. Maybe he's just finds space by standing still because everyone else moves and they move off him. But he got himself in a really good position. It's a really, really well worked move, and he ends up at the top end. But credit to Portadown for how they reacted. I feared at one stage it could become embarrassing for them when it went to 3-0. And there was a spell in around about sort of 70 minutes where I started to think it was becoming a bit like a testimonial. But the changes that Portadown made a difference. I came away sort of thinking, sort of couldn't help but wonder if a fully fit and firing Paul McElroy, from the start might have made a difference. There definitely seemed to be something different about Portadown once him and Kenny Kane came on. And Kane was obviously a threat, like I say, down that left wing. Because I think after Portadown scored, they did give Linfield a bit of a scare. There was a chance from a corner as well. I think Dougie Wilson just put it wide. If that goes in, you're looking at a massive grandstand finish. It's difficult for Portadown because not much was sticking up front with Zach Barr. When you're playing one up front against three at the back, you've got to be perfect. And Portadown weren't perfect in the defending and weren't perfect in holding the ball up. But to have got to that stage is big, but it's not the be all and end all of Portadown's season. They've got 9 games now, which are hugely important. But 7 of those games actually are going to be against teams in the top half of the championship, so they've got a tough run in.
Yeah, it all sort of falls away. A bit of a dampener if you're a Portadown fan, because we were chatting on the podcast last week. They go into that game against Glentoran in the Irish Cup at home with a bit of hope. They don't get through that. They think, well, we'll still got the final. As much as they were underdogs, there was probably still a little glint in their eye that they thought this could be the thing that could work out for them. It doesn't. And now it's back to porridge. They're 4th out of the 4 contenders, and they've got it all to do. And do they have enough games? Can they shake off the past week of disappointments? Do they have the right bodies and players to fix these defensive issues that seems to be plaguing them, and we're all there to see on Sunday? I've got to give Annette credit. I think that's the first game that I've saw him, and I thought, actually, you look to be a future starter for this Linfield side. Yes, he might be slightly diminutive, but I mean, 19 years old, he has the fight, he's got the hunger, he can hold up the ball. I can see how he's not given McKee space in that team right now, because he is adding so much to that side going forward. Fitzpatrick is clearly the main man up there, but yes, Annette deserved his goal for his dogged performance. And yeah, you're right, for Portadown, that's the second week in a row where they've struggled against a 3-man back line, and I guess it somewhat numbs this attack from them, where it's being led by one central striker and then it's the wide men. And after that third goal, Paul McElroy comes in. Obviously, he wasn't fit enough to start. He comes in for Zach Barr, and then Kenny Kane is brought onto the left-hand side. And actually, I think Kane's the real driver for that first goal. Again, pump the ball into space, he'll chase it down, a nice bit of work, and they get that goal. And I'm sure that for many Portadown fans, that's probably was worth the trip alone. At least they saw the goal, at least they weren't completely torn asunder in the final. And you're right, there was that corner where, I mean, if Dougie Wilson had just anticipated a bit more and stuck his head in, it would have been a contest, because it all quieted down in that second half, because it pretty much looked to be over. But still, there was the Portadown section in the West Stand making all the noise. But ultimately, it wasn't to be their day, and I think you can see the difference there. Portadown had an idea, they had a plan, but they just came up against a better, sharper, more skillful professional side, and you could see 1-11, they just had that edge on every single player. So 2 in a row for Linfield. They'll take it, of course. I mean, for David Healy, it's another little trinket to add to his collection, but let's all be real, it's not the main one. It's all about the Gibson Cup now, and perhaps results over the weekend will entice them a bit more, make them feel a bit better as they return to league action. But looking at that Linfield side and not really being tested by Portadown, they're going to be without Shields. It's good to have Joel Cooper back. That'll be a key body. Will they be able to go between now and the end of the season and really push this Lawrence side? I'm sure many people will say yes, but you've got to admit this impending stadium ban, it really does put them behind the 8 ball.
It actually turned out to be a great weekend for Linfield, didn't it? Because they won the trophy, and the one result that was going to impact on them in the league went probably as well as they could have expected. Yes, they probably would have preferred Larne to lose to Coleraine, but Larne dropping any sort of points was always going to be positive for them. You just don't know how the stadium ban is going to affect players. I've never experienced it. I've never been a player that's played in front of a crowd to know how much of a lift that gives you, how much of a push, how much of an advantage on your home ground. Players do say at times that once the game starts, once the whistle goes, that they blank it out and they're just focused on what happens on that rectangle of grass. And if that is the case for Linfield, then great. But I just expect that the backing that they get at Windsor is probably a factor. When you're going out on your own in your home stadium and all you have is away fans, I do think there's got to be something in there that's going to affect them.
Well, after all those influences there, trying to get in new audiences, thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to follow this Linfield side. They aren't able to go and see the big games in the split. But yeah, let's talk about some of the league games that went down there. The big result being that 0-0 draw between Larne and Coleraine. That was a huge opportunity for Larne. They look so unmoved recently, and to keep that big space between them and Linfield could have been key. Like, let's not get too over dramatic about that result for Larne. I mean, it's the first time they've dropped points this calendar year in the league, but I just did have my suspicion that going up the Coleraine, perhaps just taking their eye off it ever so slightly. And I mean, Coleraine could have won it very late on, but we will see now. Will we look back in a couple of weeks and say that game against Coleraine, that's when the wheels started to wobble and they fell off this what seemed like an almost perfect track to the title? Or will it be a blip that has been impacting all the teams around them? It's very like Larne to not concede, but to not score. That's something they've usually been quite good at.
You only have to look at the ability they have up front. Paul O'Neill, Andy Ryan, Lee Bonus, and the way they can create goals out of not an awful lot. Yeah, it's a surprise when Larne don't score. But now that result has actually ended up with the title destiny is in both Larne and Linfield's hands, because they obviously have to play each other after the split. It's fantastic for the league, fantastic for the neutral, watching how this title race is going to pan out. And much as we probably thought that Cliftonville, with those couple of defeats, were a long way back, that result on Saturday maybe gives them a little glimmer, because it's what, 7 points between them and Larne. Do what they haven't been able to do and not being able to beat Linfield and Larne. If they can manage to do that after the split, it could bring them back into it. And 3-horse race would be fantastic going into the last couple of weeks. And that's what that result on Saturday has brought about. And it's also brought about a massive chase for the top 6 as well. Coleraine have had a good upturn recently, which isn't a surprise to me. I think their form is 3 wins and a draw in the last 5. The pressure had been on Oran Kearney. I thought it's the old thing: form's temporary, class is permanent. They were a better team than the results were showing, and if they had taken the decision to sack Oran Kearney, I'm not sure there's a high number of candidates out there who would be adequate replacements, and he would be the next person to walk into the next job that would come available in the league, because he is a good manager who's proven himself.
Well, let's not get too panicked about this Larne result. Ultimately, the last time Linfield were up there, they were thumped 3-0 by the Bandsiders. And you know what? I've got to give Oran Kearney a bit of plaudits for that game. I mean, this is a manager who has run the title close from up there on the Ballycastle Road. And as much as the season may not be one of their vintage, and yes, he's felt an immense amount of pressure from the fans there, he still has the experience of what many people would still believe a top-end manager. And I feel as though he did a job there. He knew exactly what he was about to face. And I mean, I've already said it, they could have nicked it. They stood firm defensively, which has been a big issue for them. And they were able to nullify all those wonderful attacking threats that you've mentioned. And I wonder now, because we saw the big change there in January where we saw the inclusion of McGonigal, Scott, and Brown. And they're going to be three big parts of this team next season. And sometimes when this season is completely out, you can use these games between now and May to start building up momentum for next year. We've seen it both good and bad. Sometimes if you end the season great, you can keep that going. If it tails off, it's hard to start the engine and really start firing on all cylinders from the start of August. This has been a tricky side for Larne. I think they drew 0-0 with them last time they were up in that part of the country. So plenty of big games. It does look as though Coleraine have solidified sixth, helped in part to the other teams chasing them. But I mean, if you are a fan of the Bandsiders, it hasn't been fun. It's been torrid. You must feel like it's been raining on you all season. But as you say, some of their performances haven't been bad as their results. And you still look at that team, 1-11. Don't know how many are going to stay there. But McHenry, Glacken, McGonigal, Shevlin. You need to sort out that centre midfield and maybe the centre back pairing, which I mean, which team doesn't and isn't looking out for more centre back depth? But they could really springboard a nice little run between now and the end of the season into something next year. And as proven there over the past few weeks against Linfield and Larne, they could be the little dodgy spoke in the wheel here for this title run.
Yes, they're still obviously, if they make it into the top six, they've got all those teams to play again. And yeah, Larne and Linfield have both come a cropper to different extents up there. And no one ever likes going to Coleraine. I don't know if it's the journey or what it is. It's a nice ground and they've got a really nice pitch now. It is a very, very tricky place to go, and that's been the case, since I've been watching Irish League football. Colerane's home form has always been decent. They still are in with a sniff of Europe. If they get a result here at the weekend, it guarantees them top six, guarantees them a European playoff place.
You're absolutely right. I talk about good runs. A good run could also be a European playoff spot, and where they go from there, maybe even sneak one.
You never know. Those playoffs can be a lottery. We've seen a couple of them go to penalties over the years. So there's loads to play for everybody in that top half, especially the top four, who have got the Irish Cup as well to go for.
This sets us up quite interestingly now, with all three teams having played 31 games. Cliftonville are the team following up in the rear with a 2-game losing streak on their part. They've got 67 points. Then it's Linfield ahead of them on 72. And then Larne with just that 2-point lead on 74. You really think they've clawed back all those points and would have had a bigger lead. In fact, it would have been 76 if they would have won out. So, I mean, that's within a win's reach. And then on the other side of that, then Coleraine get a point. And, a couple of weeks ago, there was chat that maybe Carrick were going to be the team that were going to really fight for that 6th place with Coleraine. But with a couple of games to go now, only a few, I mean, it looks like Loughgall might be the team that if any team's going to sneak it, it could be them. After a run where they couldn't score and they go to the Oval where they were pumped 6 earlier on in the season. One of the big results this year, 3-0, looked calm, looked assured, and you may add this to just the laundry list of disappointing, frustrating results at home for Glentoran. Yes, they go down to 10 men, but Loughgall did a number on them, and now Loughgall are only 3 points away from Coleraine in 6th. What a season Dean Smith's side has had this year.
Yeah, no disrespect to Dean. I've seen a lot of Loughgall, and at times they've been very impressive. But this was a surprise result, considering that they got very much turned over the last time they were at the Oval. I'd seen Glentoran last Tuesday night at Mornview Park, and they'd been decent without scoring a goal that had actually been given. With what they have up front and how they attack, you expect them to score. I think that's now 3 league games in a row that they've failed to score since they banged in the 8 against Newry. They must have used up all their goals in one game. They just haven't been able to find the net. this season. But I think possibly the bigger pitch and the better surface. The pitch at Lakeview Park's a bit ropey at the minute. But I think that has helped Loughgall. By all accounts, they played very well at Larne recently and played very well at Cliftonville in the Cup. So there's history of performing well away from home. Maybe the 3G pitches are helpful to Loughgall. And they've gone obviously there and got the result that the performance has merited. And I'm really pleased for Nathaniel Ferris. He's been impressive in the second half of the season, and now the goals are coming for him. The first half of the season, he was putting in tremendous shifts every week as a target man, just trying to win headers and trying to get some sort of contact on the ball to keep possession and trying to make it stick at times and not always getting the rewards. And then he got left out against Crusaders, but came off the bench, almost scored very quickly, and then did score at the end. And then he's gone to the Oval and got two. So this is a lad that's banging form right now, and it's good to see. I think he's adapted gradually as the season's gone on to the Premiership, and he's definitely starting to show now that he's a Premiership standard frontman.
He's a big honking striker, isn't he? He's that, as you labelled him as, a target man, but I mean, he's happy to battle it out one-on-one. He can score headers. He has a big thunderous right foot when he wants to wrap his boot round it. So, and there he is. We all the plaudits for Benjamin McGee, and absolutely right with him sitting there third in the goal scorers chart. There's Nathaniel Ferris down at 9, but he's got the same amount of goals as David Fisher, one off Ronan Hale, Ben Kennedy, Lee Bonus. So, I mean, these goals from McGee and Ferris, particularly in more recent games, it's the reason why they're there, nipping at the heels of a side like Coleraine with all their talent. This Loughgall side work really well together and put in a massive shift every week. And unfortunately, the assessment from many Glentoran fans was that was not what their Glentoran side put in on Saturday at the Oval. We were not in car park protest zone. We're not in that area, but we could see after that game that a number of Glentoran supporters clubs have come out and said that they want Ali Purr to make changes at the club when it comes to the management. We all know since last summer that Warren Feeney has been under the cosh from day one. He was a former Linfield manager. Many Glentoran fans said that they didn't think he had the track record and subsequent jobs beyond Linfield to be the Glentoran manager. And you've got to admit that the club has seen a regression this season compared to last year. I know Warren Feeney's talked about that he hasn't been able to get all the players he's wanted in. He's had to move some on. But it's just this whirlwind life of following Glentoran. They look so good, and then they fall away. They are able to just flat track bully people, and then they get a good old biff on the nose, a shock like they did on Saturday. A team they tanked earlier on the season are able to run rings around them when it comes to the result. And it looks as though that is now bubbling to the surface. I mean, there's been a couple of statements from some supporters clubs from Glentoran, and I'll not read them all out here, but pretty much their words are, we're not happy and we would like a change in manager.
When Glentoran fans start to become disgruntled, it's never a comfortable place for anyone, let alone the manager.
And it's not, I'll say this, it's not rare.
No.
It's not rare. I will quote one thing: the disconnect between those, and this comes from the Glentoran Supporters Committee, 1923 on Twitter. The disconnect between those in charge and the fans is the worst it's been. Time for Ali Purr to step up or move on. The worst it's been? I mean, Glentoran have been through the ringer over the past few years. Yes, there's been some high moments, but that's a big statement to make, no?
Yeah, and the strange thing is that when the investment came into the club, they probably thought that things were going to be very, very different than they are right now. And when they haven't really put in a challenge for a league title for quite a wee while, even before the investment came in, and to have one Irish Cup as a return, and things to be going as they are now, no wonder that the fans are starting to get a bit restless, more than a bit, I suppose. I think we all are well aware that there's a decent percentage of Glentoran fans who'll never warm to Warren Feeney. They didn't want them at the start, and they still don't want them. How many he's managed to win over, I'm not sure. That percentage is just going to grow larger with every defeat, especially the way things have gone. I don't know. I don't know what people at Glentoran are thinking, if Warren is safe or if the fans are going to get what they want out of this. If he's still around, I think the next two games are huge. The next two games are must win for him. Glentoran can't be going to Dungannon and then having Ballymena at home and not winning those two games.
That game against Dungannon is obviously quite symbolic because it's against Rodney McAree, a manager who walked away from this club after taking good care of it from January, and then in comes Warren Feeney, and I'm breezing through some of these statements, but you can see reported in the likes of the Belfast Telegraph from some of these supporters clubs, and they're talking about how they didn't really like the appointment. They said they were not thrilled, but they claim that they gave him a chance, benefit of the doubt, and you can see some of the lines from these statements. They're calling recent results shambolic. They're talking about negative tactics. They're complaining about statements in the media from Feeney, who is blaming the players, they believe, when it comes to results, despite results they believe being different under Rodney McAree. So yeah, what do these Glentoran fans expect? Well, as a full-time team, I'm sure they expect to be first and foremost at least third, because there's only two other full-time teams. They, beyond that, as a bare minimum, would then like to be challenging for the league. They've seen the investment, they can see the players that are on the pitch, and perhaps what they are suggesting is that we think we've got the structure, the bare bones of the team that can do well, and they think they can somebody else can get a better song, can produce better results, and that's what they're after. Because a lot of this side was a part of the team early last season, where it looked as though they could have went on this incredible season-long run. We all know it all fell apart when the night started to become dark. But I mean, if you really think back to the early part of last season, and it's pretty much all the same players that are there, bar one or two names, this team looked immense. And yes, they don't have McMenamin, but to go from that to now be sniffing at fourth, maybe falling away from that, and languishing in fifth, at least in what many supporters' eyes would say is languishing. If you're analysing it, you can see from results and performances why fans are frustrated. But what's the answer going to be? Is there going to be change before the end of the season? Looks unlikely. You make a good point there. Okay, so we've seen plenty of times where fans are frustrated with managers. We saw it this season with Coleraine. So, what can Warren Feeney do to turn this around? I think bare minimum is probably qualifying for Europe one way or the other. But while there's not a lot of the season to go, there's still plenty of the season to go when it comes to trying to nail that down for one of these teams.
The easiest way for managers to win people over and turn things around is, well, say the easiest, is to win games. And like I said about Jim Magilton, I think that's what he's done at Cliftonville. Glentoran, yeah, you go back there to the start of last season, when they had a massively long unbeaten run right through to into October, maybe even November. I think did that stop at Mournview Park in a draw, or maybe even a win for Glenavon. I think it was there that night. And yeah, everyone was making them favourites to win the league at that stage, but the title challenge really only lasted half a season. This season, did it even get off the ground at all? Were they ever really considered to be in a title race? I'm not sure. So yeah, if Warren had gone in there and started to win games and been in the title mix still at this stage, I don't think that those fans would be particularly loud, even the ones that didn't favour him. Consistency is a massive thing. They haven't had that, but I also think that consistency in team selection, consistency in results, and I'm not here to make excuses for Warren Feeney, but there's a difference between excuses and reasons. And yeah, I looked at the team last Tuesday night at Mourneview, and I look at go down the list here. Marcus Kane was missing, Luke McCulloch was missing, Aidan Wilson was missing, Reece Marshall has hardly played all season, Jay Donnelly was missing, Cameron Palmer was missing, and those are big holes to fill. Those are top players. If you have those players in your team, like that's basically a full defence and a couple of decent midfielders and a striker who Warren was tipping to become the best striker in the league again, and Jay Donnelly. There's got to be somewhere along the line maybe a bit of realism set in there when you're missing that quality of player. But the talk about you've mentioned that line negative tactics. I haven't seen Glentoran playing particularly great football when I've watched them this season.
Despite all these big mad goals that they've had against the likes of Newry, the goal hauls against Newry and Loughgall and all the rest, there's been bright moments and then there's been slightly duller ones.
Yeah, albeit they did have the ball in the net 3 times at Mourneview last week, and a couple of very good chances. And you would expect them to score goals, but once the goals are dry up, like say the last 3 games they haven't scored, trying to turn that round is, if you're not scoring goals, you're not going to win games. If you're not winning games, you're not going to get the fans on board. And if the fans aren't going to be on board, it becomes uncomfortable for the manager, which then feeds into the players, and it becomes uncomfortable for the guys in the boardroom as well.
The one thing to remember, and I guess I'm probably more aware of it because you're hearing things being talked about. At this time of the season, yes, all these managers are looking to finish the rest of the season, but at this time, some deals are starting to take shape. The idea of where you want to have your team looking for next year is starting to come together when it comes to potential pre-contract agreements, or at least maybe feeling out who might be available in the summer. And this Glentoran team has a lot of players who are leaving the club, or at least have deals that will end come the end of this season. So a lot of this work that I'm sure Feeney's a big part of, moves are already being made. So perhaps the club are looking at it going, well, we have to continue this to the final end. He's putting his fingerprints on this team, I imagine, if they are talking to other players to bring in, and that would that not be a bit odd to try and change that up mid process? And I guess just to move on, but also talk about this idea. We saw there over the weekend that Crusaders, we all know that Stephen Baxter is set to leave and move on come the end of the season, but they say that they are potentially maybe only days away from announcing their next manager. And there's a few things that springs up, but a part of that could be, well, you have a new manager that can then start planning, and a part of that planning would be, who are they signing, who are they bringing in. So in many ways, stuff for next season is already beginning, and to move on to Crusaders, like that's a big statement. We all, I guess, expected there to be some sort of situation of the succession plan for Stephen Baxter moving on, but the fact that by the time this podcast comes out next week, we could be analysing and talking about a new Crusaders manager. We've heard a few names in the media that are being ruled out, but are we any closer maybe to some of the other rumoured names being the person that gets named and paraded around with a scarf around Seaview this week?
I think if you're a Crusaders fan, it's probably quite an exciting time. You're itching to find out who the new manager is, and then what's going to come within the next few months. There's nothing worse than maybe Stephen going at the end of the season and then waiting weeks to try and find out, or waiting weeks to get an appointment confirmed by the club. And well done to the club for acting so quickly and getting someone on board as quickly as they have. Who that is, by the time this comes out, we could be very much out of date, old news, gone stale very quickly if the appointment does come. The fact that they've said that they're ready to announce makes me think that it's someone who isn't in a job. I find it odd. I would find it difficult for the individual concerned if they were announced as the next Crusaders manager, if they were already in a job. So it makes me think that it's someone who's free at the minute. I've no idea who it might be, and I don't want to get into any sort of wild speculation, but it might start people thinking Paddy McLaughlin.
Well, that is one of the big names that have been mooted for this job from the very beginning, mainly because the fact that, as you alluded to there, it's likely that it's going to be someone that is not currently in work with another club. They are not in work with another club. Some of the names that have been talked about, but it looks as though, according to reporting, it's not going to be, is Dermot O'Carroll. He was only for a short time former player of Crusaders. He's a part of the Northern Ireland management setup. He's assistant manager over there to Stephen Robinson at St Mirren. So he says no, according to what's being talked about. Also, Tommy Wright, ex St Johnson manager, was in the league for a number of years with Limavady Distillery and Ballymena as well. Obviously, former Northern Ireland national keeper. That isn't going to happen. So, I mean, you'd probably say from the big, quote unquote, big names, the ones that are still out there, it would be the likes of Paddy McLaughlin. I saw it reported elsewhere, maybe Jared Little, Gary Hamilton potentially was one of the names that was being thrown about there. Maybe the fact that they're going to announce it, could it be someone internally within the club? We've heard a few of these ideas that it might be a player stepping up, Cadell, Tuffy, whatever, or could it be someone as a part of that team right now? Peter Thompson, who's been a manager lower in the league. So it's definitely going to be interesting, and it's going to be a unique story because there's a lot of change coming this way to this Crusaders side. They went out against the worst attacking force in the league almost in Ballymena, but Ballymena are able to squeeze 2 goals and make it interesting. But some of the big players for Crusaders come to the fore. 4-2 it ends. Goals from Kennedy and Leckie and all the rest. Shows that there's plenty of work needs done for next season to knit this team into the force that it used to be.
It's going to be interesting when Crusaders do announce as to how things are going to work. Are we going to have 2 managers working parallel? The current one working with the squad that they have now, and the new guy working in the behind the scenes, preparing for July, August. Who are the players trying to impress? Are they trying to impress Stephen to stay in the team at the minute? Or are they trying to impress the new guy to make sure that they're in his plans? I'm not saying there's anything negative about that scenario. It's just something that we're probably not quite familiar with, because these aren't situations that come up very often. I think Stephen had said that he didn't want to be involved in the appointment. When you have a current manager and a guy ready to come on board, they will somewhere along the line be working together, I'm sure. I don't think that would be possible to not be working together. But like I said, it's an exciting time for Crusaders fans when they're just on tenterhooks waiting to see who their new manager is going to be, and depending on who it is, it could be a very exciting appointment. But what you've got to remember is Crusaders will need to appoint someone who has the UEFA Pro license or is on the Pro license course if they have ambitions here to get into Europe at the end of the season.
Well, they are edging towards getting that what could be quite pivotal home advantage in some of these games by finishing 4th. That's really the big thing there, pushing forward between now and the end of the season. Yeah, funny little game down there at the Ballymena Showgrounds. I mean, it feels as though Crusaders have almost made a hash of it up there at Ballymena a few times, but they are still able to get the points with the goals. I mean, the goal of the game for me was absolutely that Fraser Taylor rocket. We've seen that he can produce that, and I mean, if Ballymena are going to get out of this current relegation situation, then they'll need to rely on him. It obviously transitions very easily now to right down to the bottom of that league and Newry. I mean, there's 2 sides of the story. Carrick just throwing away this chance to establishing themselves in that top 6 position when the fixtures look to fall quite nicely for them. They're against the bottom side in the league, the worst defence in the entirety of top flight football in Europe for the amount of goals conceded, and with all that talent that they have there, they're not able to break them down. And it's Newry who get the goal fairly late on. 3 vital points. That goal, that final whistle must have felt like 6 points. Huge for Newry. Finally now, they can start to believe, and it's all starting to work together. This concoction of a team is starting to work for Barry Gray, he'll hope. And it puts them right back into this. 2 points off Ballymena. Perhaps it may be a bright spark that fizzles away very easily. But they can really start to believe again.
Yeah, the relegation battle did take a bit of a swing during that second half on Saturday, when at one stage Ballymena were ahead and Newry and Carrick were missing several chances. I remember earlier on in the season seeing Ballymena concede 3 in 5 minutes at Loughgall when they were 1-0 up, and then it was 3-7 this time. So it's not the first time they've let a lead slip in the blink of an eye, and that's not a good habit to be in. Fraser Taylor, we've seen him before. He doesn't score ordinary goals. What a finish it was. And in front of Dermot O'Carroll, the St Mirren assistant manager. Good time to do that. So if he doesn't get a first team shot at St Mirren next season, I think there'd be opportunities for him. He's a talent. Wouldn't surprise me if Irish League clubs are keeping a watchful eye on him. Some of the guys at the top end of the table, because he is a decent quality player. The Carrick Newry game, you'd have had Carrick down as a home banker. I'm not a betting man, but I would suggest that that result has bust quite a few coupons on Saturday.
It wrecked my fantasy team, I'll say that.
And I haven't watched the highlights. Carrick just didn't have a load of chances. They had good chances, but when you don't take them, you're vulnerable. When the game's 0-0, it's in the balance, and for them, they've dropped 5 points now in the last 2 games. They might have been expecting to collect 6, especially when they led 3-1 at Loughgall a couple of weeks ago. And with those extra 5 points, they would be in the top 6. They would have leaped over Coleraine. And now they go to Ballymena on Saturday, which is a big game for both teams, and with the ambitions that they have. Ballymena to make sure they get safe, and Carrick if they are still hoping to get in the top 6. And then Carrick have Linfield in the last game before the split, which is a difficult one, so they need to really go to Ballymena and get something. But right at the bottom now, there's 2 points separating the bottom 2. Newry seem to be picking up points in the games that matter, which are against the bottom 6. They got a point at home to Ballymena. They got a point at Loughgall. They've now taken 3 at Carrick. And Ballymena aren't quite doing that. But similar to the top, where I've said that Linfield and Larne, their destinies in their own hands because they've got to play each other. And that's now the same at the bottom. If Newry win their games, and particularly if they beat Ballymena after the split, they're off the bottom, and Barry's on the way to being a hero at Newry Showgrounds, where no one would have thought that a few weeks back.
It's squeaky bum time for both those sides. I guess for Newry, they've been languishing there. Ballymena were somewhat hoping that maybe their performances were turning round and they weren't going to have to worry about this. But again, when you're down there at the bottom, those 3 points that come by hook or by crook, they're a massive swing. And if Newry are going to get their way out of it, it's going to be by somehow scoring goals again and getting things like a clean sheet, no matter how rare they are, back into their repertoire, and perhaps also need to rely on the talents of the likes of McGovern. I mean, you can just see him twisting and turning on the left-hand side and ping that ball in that's then headed in towards the box for the goal to come in. So, they have a few players that can make the difference and perhaps have more recognised strikers than what Ballymena have. Ballymena were without Noah Stewart and over on Saturday there. And look, they get 2 goals and they'll be relying on Fraser Taylor. But I mean, that it's going to be really interesting in the run-in because the likes of Dungannon, Glenavon, maybe even Carrick, if they don't get rolling, perhaps these teams aren't going to be as motivated as a Newry and Ballymena may be, and that's where some points may come their way, and perhaps playing one team earlier on in the split is worse than playing them later on when perhaps they don't have as much to play for, so I mean, it will be fascinating. We had this little pocket round, 6th and 7th, which looks to be ever so slightly dissipating. But I mean, Loughgall and Carrick will be fighting for that between now and the end of the season. But down at the bottom, it could be fascinating. It might not be pretty football, but I mean, a lot will be on the line. And, talking about seasons maybe petering out for both teams. Not a great day for Dungannon, just finally wrapping up Saturday's games. 4-0, they get thumped really by Glenavon. That's a nice little 4 points they get in a week at home. And I mean, they're pretty much fighting to get themselves nice and fit for next year. It doesn't really look like they're going to be in any real contention for 6th. It'd be hard for them to... Oh, well, they still could maybe sneak 7th if they keep going, if Loughgall kind of turn off the burners. But on the day, good result for Glenavon, poor for the Swifts. But that's kind of the way the Swifts have been, haven't they? They look impressive and then they let it all fall apart. I know there's a red card in there, but still difficult watching.
Yeah, the game was already done before the red card. It had no impact at all on the match itself. I was quite shocked by the lack of intensity from Dungannon. It was probably the most un-Dungannon-like performance I've seen from the Swifts in quite a while. You usually expect them to be quite slick, move the ball quickly, wee bit of pace about them, and, like I say, intensity. There was just none of that there. I guess Glenavon scoring quite early built the momentum, and they just rolled off that, getting the 2 goals quite quickly. The Dungannon defence then in a bit of disarray. Dean Curry has to go off with an injury. They've got an experienced goalkeeper in who, maybe given his age and lack of experience, hasn't quite got the same leadership from that position and being in control of his defence. And yeah, Glenavon were comfortable. The goals, the first 2 goals were fairly shambolic from a defensive point of view. Dungannon, and then if you're Lido Latifa, the hat-trick goal was, couldn't have fallen any nicer for him. James Duna hit the crossbar, and then it basically hit Lido Latifa 2 yards out as he's gone off celebrating with another couple of players. James Duna's just turning around laughing. I don't know if he's laughing at how did my chance not go in, and then he gets the plaudits because it's hit in. Unfortunate enough for Duna, and then actually, as much as there was a hat trick scored in the game, Matthew Snoddy scored the best goal. An absolute great strike, edge of the box, half volley. Yeah, decent enough performance from Glenavon, and Dungannon, after a win against Linfield and a win against Cliftonville. You're thinking, that is this the same team that got those results? It was quite bizarre from them.
Story of their season, unfortunately, consistently inconsistent. At this point in the podcast, every week we've just been dipping into what's going on in this rather interesting championship race. Obviously, Portadown were otherwise entertained at the weekend, which gave all those teams around them at the top the chance to get a bit more pursuit towards that title. It was another poor weekend for Dundela. They go into that East Belfast derby and they're down to 9 men. They lose 3-1. They had a last minute late penalty that they could have pulled it back to 2-2, and everybody else in Portadown, Bangor and the Institute side of Derry were delighted with that result. Dundela have the nice little stretch of points, but they could be throwing it all away with Institute beating bottom side Knockbreda 3-0 and Bangor with another impressive 4-0 win.
Dundela scored after 5 minutes at the Welders, and you'd think it, like I said about Glenavon, the momentum just started rolling from there. You would have thought that might have been the case for Dundela, who have been in good form, but since the talk of them not being promoted, they've lost 2 out of 3. So you just got to start to wonder, is that a factor? Are the players then psychologically switched off? Because they know that they're not going to be going up into the Premiership anyway, and that might suit other teams if that is the case. But it's going to be a frenetic race.
Definitely doesn't suit Newry or Ballymena.
Well, I think the situation as it is now, if Dundela were to win the league, those are the only 2 teams that benefit. The Premiership teams, the Championship teams who finish second, third, don't benefit in any way.
And this is, of course, relating to the potential that their pitch isn't going to qualify them for a Premiership licence, which has not been confirmed, but has been widely reported that's going to be an issue, which would mean they couldn't be promoted despite winning the league.
Yeah, the pitch is too narrow to meet the criteria, and from all accounts, it doesn't seem that they're interested in a ground share. Purely their decision, and their right to make that decision. They just see themselves as a championship club. That's fine. I just don't know what it does for that level of football when a team wants to play in that league but doesn't want to go up but wants to try and win it. It's not a scenario that you would see really anywhere else.
That'd be very tough, I'm sure, on Dundela, who would like to win it outright and be recognised as the champions of that level outright. That's what they're still pushing for. Looking at it, it would obviously be a symbolic win for Dundela if they were to get it. They are the leaders. They've got 2 points on Bangor, 4 on Institute, and they have 7 on Portadown, but Portadown have played 1 game less. So plenty for the big boys in Mid-Ulster to do between now and the end of the season. They've got 9 games left. Everybody else has got 8. I mean, I've kind of said this before. There's something about this Bangor side that just looks to have a lot of fight, determination, and just look to have this aura of confidence. Portadown look shaken at times because they constantly think of an idea where they're not winning this league. But for Bangor in particular, it's like they've won the lottery. Everything's to be gained here. Nothing to lose, and first or second doesn't really matter. They still remember what would be the bad old days in the Ballymena League, and they'll be sitting there fighting at the top of this league with some really nice players. I think that was a big move that Ben Arthurs has signed on for them for next season and beyond. That's massive. And shows the intention, regardless it's going to be this season or next season, that they want to build. And they've got huge potential there at Bangor, and it would be an immense story for them to do the double when it comes to promotion season after season and to get it. So my money feels like it's on them, but you've got to say, if there's one team that has the experience and probably the quality 1 to 11, especially if Paul McElroy's back, I think he's the best striker in that league by a fair bit, even including the likes of Arthurs and Jordan Jenkins for Dundela. It'll be week to week. Things could change massively.
Yeah, you could pretty much throw a blanket over that top 4. Any one of them it could go and take this title. Yeah, you're making Bangor your favourites. Who would have thought? But back to back promotions, or the
with broadly the same team. I'm sure they would have a significant amount. Yes, there's been additions, but they've done a lock all in many ways coming up to that division. I'm sure Lewis Bennett would tell me more.
Yeah, it's going to be an intense race, that one, especially when it comes to the split, because right throughout that championship, top to bottom, everybody is capable of beating everyone else, and nobody particularly has put together a massively consistent run. But if you can do that in that league, you run away with it, because, like I say, everyone else will drop points. Bangor, I did see Bangor at Shamrock Park in the Irish Cup game, actually, and yeah, Arthurs is a threat. The other player quite impressed with was Scott MacArthur, and it did.
MacArthur, I know. I always think, which one has the S again?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me in the least that he ended up getting the Championship Player of the Month for February. He's a bright spark that day. Good player, and I think that they signed Callum Byers in the window as well, didn't they, at the back, just to give them a wee bit more steel in there. You couldn't write anyone off in that race. Someone told me a while back that with the signings that Institute made in January, they thought they were going to be the favourites. Danny Lafferty is an international footballer an awful long time ago. Michael Kennedy, there's a reason why Crusaders wanted to sign him. He just didn't quite spark there, but he's a good quality striker. The striking quality in that top 4 in the championship is quite good, and that's what could fire any one of them to the title. Anna are a little bit back. They've got the same number of points as Portadown, albeit played 2 games more. Do you think they would need something to go their way very much for them to get into that race?
They could be the one that really upsets everybody else when it comes to the split. Yeah.
It could, as could the welders who did that on Saturday
True.
at Dundela.
So
Yeah,
we'll get on to the Premiership very soon, but we'll not do a full review. But they all come thick and fast. Institute play Portadown this weekend. Dundela have the Mallards, and I guess probably an easier game for Bangor. They take on Knockbredia, the bottom side, and well, Anna and Newington will battle it out in that kind of mid-table area. But let's get on
but
to
Portadown are coming off the back of, like you said earlier on, what way will they be affected by coming off the back of that defeat again in the Irish Cup to Cliftonville, coming off the back of the cup final defeat down to Linfield. Then they go into what's a massive week where they go to Institute, they go to Ards, and then they've got Bangor at home within the space of a week, Saturday, Tuesday, Friday. That's going to be a tough schedule. That's going to be a tough schedule for them. But they will have the players who weren't available in the cup final against Linfield, who the ones who were cup tied. So we'll have a full squad to pick from, and possibly Chris Rogers if he's declared fit to play. So that will help Portadown. But I suppose all of them have just got to keep their squads fit, free from suspension, and they're going to be going hammer and tongs at it. The Premiership title race is exciting. The battle for top 6 and then 7th in the Premiership is going to be exciting. Bottom 2, it's now become an interesting battle, and the Championship's going to be even more intense, I think, than all of those.
We look ahead to the teams that are looking to stay up. Let's look ahead to this weekend and some of the teams that are trying to keep their place in this top division. We've already highlighted it there. A load of games happening on Saturday. All these right now are Saturday, 3 o'clock, just like, like football intended. Ballymena, Carrick Rangers. I mean, just throw some numbers in the air and see what fall down. If it's 0-0, that's probably the most likely score here. But I mean, plenty to fight for both teams. But none of them are really going through any sort of motion that says that they should be the strong favourites going into it.
Yeah, after Saturday, you just wonder which of those two would come out on top of this one. For Carrick, I think the motivation is that this is probably their last shot, realistically, at getting a good points haul of 3 points before the split, because they play Linfield in the last game. So if they are going to try and strengthen their challenge for top 7 or for 7th and the last playoff place, they're going to look to win this one. But if they have any chance of getting into the top 6, they probably have to win this one as well. Ballymena, they go to the Oval after this, so are they going to be looking at this as a big chance? The Uri go to Linfield and Ballymena at home. So I think Jim will be looking at this one as thinking that they've got a chance of opening up a gap again over in Uri again, and try and make sure that they've got enough of a distance that one game isn't going to turn that when they play in Uri after the split.
First goal will be key in this game. I think it would give the team that gets it confidence. Neither team has particularly enjoyed a great run recently. So, I mean, if either of these teams get a bit of confidence, I think they can outwork and put the pressure on the other side. Whoever that is, I don't know. I actually think I'm going to back Ballymena. The fact that it's at home again and they got those 2 goals against Crusaders, I imagine Jim Irvin's just going to say, same again. Deal with your personal battles one-on-one, and if we can get even just one of those goals, we can put pressure on Carrick. But again, I've seen Carrick. Danny Perkis is a quality striker. He's got good players around him, and we could be talking about this very differently if one of those chances against Newry had went in. But I'm going to go 1-0 Ballymena in that. I'm not going to be so brave in that game between Linfield and Newry. Anything but a multiple goal victory for Linfield might be the result of the season, or the shock of the season. So I'm not going to go against it, But whatever number you want, 2, 3, whatever. 3-1 probably Linfield there.
Yeah, you say the first goal in the Ballymena Carrick game could be big, but both of them have thrown away leads in the last couple of games. So they will, you'd rather score the first goal than not. Yeah, I'm going to lean towards Carrick on that one. Having seen them and the firepower that they have, they bring Curtis Allen off the bench. They replaced Danny Gibson / Perkis, and then with Natus Makalitis, creating, and even big Emmett McGugan, who didn't come on at Loughgall a couple of weeks ago. He's always a man that you fear might get a goal. So yeah, relatively speaking, Carrick have got a really strong strike force. I know we're talking about the three at Larne. They've got the four at Cliftonville, and Gormley, Ashford, Wilson, and Ryan Curran's obviously injured, but then they've got the Hales. But relatively speaking, Carrick have a good strike force there, so I always expect them to score. How they didn't score on Saturday with the chances I've seen that they had is beyond me. So that battle at the bottom, I don't see either of the two teams picking up points. If Newry go to Linfield and get something, that could be a massive, massive point come the end of the season.
Are you going to back them?
Newry?
Yes.
Well, you probably wouldn't back them at home, given their home record.
That's true.
So, yeah, maybe they are going to do better away, but yeah, you really couldn't see Linfield slipping up in that game, and if they do, that let Larne possibly build up a lead again. It'll be kicking themselves. Yeah, on the back of winning the trophy. I don't expect Linfield to be dropping anything.
Larne having a big old early wake up call of a 3 p.m. game on Saturday, 2 weekends in a row. It's at Inver Park though against Glenavon. I mean, Glenavon are scoring goals based on last week. I don't think they'll be gifted the same type of chances they did against Dungannon. You imagine this is a bounce back game for Larne, but I've always found that this can be a tricky fixture for Larne at times. But I think the fact that it's going to be at home probably says that it should be a victory for them.
Yeah, do we start to wonder, do Larne have nocturnal tendencies? Do they only come out in the dark?
Vampire Larne.
Yeah. Stephen McDonald, I didn't see the game, but Stephen McDonald tells me that the last time that Larne or Glenavon went down there, they played very, very well, and he was very happy with the performance. In his first game, Glenavon was also against Larne, and 11v11. They matched them. Once Robbie Garrett got sent off that night, Lee Bonus scores a hat-trick. It's game over. But Glenavon are that type of team that'll stay in games. So they could make it tough for Larne, but I've also seen Larne where even the game against Glentoran on the Friday night stream a couple of weeks ago, they won that game fairly comfortably without really being particularly impressive. He got the job done and he created really, really good goals. I give them credit that way. And like we said, those three guys, they don't need much of a chance. They don't need too many chances because they just have the finishing quality and they can just run off a centre half who, in the blink of an eye, is completely taken out of the game and break through. So I would expect Larne to win that game. I don't expect them to win it particularly easily.
2-0 for me, probably not one of their more sterling performances, but right now they just needed to resist doing anything bar winning if they want to keep up their push to retain the Gibson Cup. We talked about it earlier, the Rodney Bowl, Swifts against Glentoran, neither feeling particularly peachy after last weekend, but I mean, Glentoran should have a reaction, I would say, but I don't know, they haven't had a sterling record down there at Stangmore Park, but they have the players that should really win out here.
They do. Glentoran have definitely got the squad that should be winning most games. Again, like I said earlier, it depends on who's fit. It depends which Dungannon Swifts turn up and which Glentoran turn up. Dungannon have got form. They've beaten Linfield and Cliftonville. And are Glentoran going to be going down there a little bit nervy after Saturday passed? Knowing that, if they don't win this, the things are going to get even more sticky than they already are. Yeah, if that plays on the players' minds and they're a bit nervy and Dungannon were to start well, that could get tricky for them. And we know from earlier on in the season, Dungannon can start very quickly. They scored within about 13 seconds against Glenavon way back in September. If they can repeat that, it's a difficult weekend for Glentoran. But I suppose if you're looking at the two squads on paper, it's a Glentoran win. We know games aren't played on paper, but I just think the quality of player that Glentoran have, they should be going out on Saturday here thinking we need to respond and dig in and get the result.
If you look at this Dungannon side, they are their total goal scored is pretty impressive. And in fact, it would be a top six side based on goals scored. I'm going to go 2-2. I think they'll be able to get the goals, but Glentoran will score them as well. A result that probably satisfies neither team, unfortunately, there. Crews, Coleraine, Crews will take every game going and try to put their best forward. Coleraine having to go down to Seaview. It's a long old journey. It would be a good statement, I think, for Coleraine if they were to get a result. And I think I'm going to back them here. 2-1 Coleraine. Crusaders have been a wee bit leaky at the back, and this may be their downfall in this game.
I think this one's set up to be an absolutely cracking game. I think this could be the game of the weekend between these.
Could be a new manager bounce as well for the Crews, so I'm not factoring that in. Or at least new daddy sitting in the stands kind of thing.
Could be a bit of that. The Crews have bounced back really well. I think they had a very poor January, and they've come back a good bit now. A player I've been very impressed with has been Lewis Barr at the back. He's been developing over the last few seasons, I know, coming in and out of the team at times. But I can't see him being anything other than a first team player for them now. Yeah, could they have the new manager sitting in the stand and the players trying to impress and give them a bit more motivation? Possibly. It's all the two teams that lately anyway, they've been fairly robust at the back, and you always expect them to score goals. That tells me it's either a tight game or a high scoring one. I'm going to go high score. I'm going to go for a high scoring draw on this one. I think this is set up to be the game of the weekend. So whoever's there, I think they're going to get their money's worth.
You say that's going to be the big game. I raise you the final game of the weekend. Loughgall, Cliftonville at Lakeview Park. Can Cliftonville jump out of their little slump right now, or will they be the latest victim of this immense Loughgall side as they pursue sixth? I mean, I'm hoping for goals. I'm hoping for drama. I think I'm going to get it. Oh, I'm going to say 3-2 Reds.
Yeah, I hope you're right, because I'm going there, and I hope it's an entertaining one. I'm actually looking forward to it. I think it could be a good game. You're saying you're going to raise me from the Seaview game. This one has the potential to be a cracking game too. Like I say, really looking forward to it. Loughgall, coming off the back of winning at the Oval, will be flying. They will be on a massive high. They've done well. I've liked watching them this season. I think lately they've had a few issues with the pitch, which hasn't helped them, because they do like to get it down and play a bit of football, as do Cliftonville. So will the pitch be in any better state this Saturday to help the two of them do that? Possibly could be, with the weather, in theory anyway, starting to get a bit better at this time of the year. So if the pitch is conducive to playing some good football, we could see a really, really good game here. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it could be a lot of goals, and I would just lean ever so slightly towards Cliftonville because of that firepower that they have in the Hales, Wilson, Gormley, Ashford. It's a cracking option for Jim and Gilton to have. Loughgall defensively are decent to maybe deal with that Cliftonville attack, but they'll have to be bang on their game for 90 minutes to stop Cliftonville.
And there you have it. Pretty much as much Irish League I think you can squeeze into one weekly podcast. I've got a final question for you. I'll let you think about it, as I'm going to ask you right now, before it all wraps up, who you think your player of the season should be come the end of the season. But while you think about that, I can promote a podcast if you want to hear more about the Irish League that I was on actually a couple of weeks ago, but it came out on Sunday with a very nice gentleman called Chris Lee. The podcast is called Outside Right, except spelled WRITE. Go to the Kick a Match Twitter account and you'll find a wee link there from one of the tweets down below. He is a football writer, mainly into the whole thing of ground hopping. So I was there to give a bit of an overview for those who might not know anything about Northern Irish football. Let them know what the Irish League is all about. So you can go check that out and potentially fact check all the wrong bits of history I got about your side and complain that I didn't talk about insert regional team here. But yes, it's very interesting chatting to him. Go check that out now. Amusingly, as I tell him about how money may be coming, if it ever comes, and it may change our league from a financial input into all these grounds. In fact, groundhoppers love our little league here. They find it quite old school. They find it quite quaint. They find it quite retro. So there you go. One man's meat is another man's poison, whatever it may be. But they enjoy going to the Oval, even if some Glentoran fans don't. So you can check that out. Mr. McKinley, while you've thought, who do you think for you should be player on the year based on whatever it's been, 30 games played?
You put me on the spot massively here. I know there's a lot of people that have already sort of given a little bit of a swing towards Rory Hale, who's had a good season. I haven't seen enough of Lauren to know really what they've got. But certainly at this stage, you've maybe got to look at, oddly, a defender at Lauren or Rowan Ferguson, because guys like that don't often get Player of the Year plaudits. They might get the odd Player of the Month, but very, very rarely is there a defender, and even more rare a goalkeeper getting the Player of the Year. So there's maybe someone in the mix there. Like I say, I haven't really seen enough of Lauren to be able to judge that. One of the players that I've certainly been impressed with has been Kyle McLean. Every time I've seen him, he's gone about his business very, very well, very consistent. One of the better players on the pitch. Every time I've seen him, got man of the match in the cup final. Yeah, did probably deservedly so, because he just kept the whole thing going. I've always wondered for a long time how Linfield replaced Jamie Mulgrew. I thought Cammy Palmer might be the natural one, and then he's moved on. Stephen Fallon looked like he was stepping up for a while, and he is a very good player. But maybe Jamie's just guiding Kyle McLean through these years of his career to then pass the baton on to him, whenever that may be. Because it doesn't look like Jamie's going to be slowing down anytime soon. He's got signed another year's contract. But yeah, Kyle McLean's been impressive when I've seen him, and if he was to get the Player of the Year, it wouldn't surprise me, and I don't know if it would surprise too many people.
And you're a football writer, have been for years. You know, they're behind some of the big awards come the end of the season. Like I said, plenty of games still to go, but you must say you've seen plenty of them this season. Benji McGee, he's in with a shout for young player, I'd say.
Gotta be goals get you recognised. It's not just his goals. There's days when I've seen him and he's put in a fantastic shift, and he's been very good without scoring goals. It can be difficult for strikers when they're not scoring because they're judged on that. But like I say, Nathaniel Ferris has been very good playing through the middle, and now Benji's gone out a little bit wider over the last little while, and he's done very, very well. And he's a threat with his pace when he is coming in from the wide areas. And we all know that clubs were interested in him and keeping a good eye on him there in January. He wanted to stay and give it another go because he knows he's going to be playing every week. And when you're playing every week, you will catch the eye. Yeah, if he scores a few more goals here between now and the end of the season, people will be looking at him and putting their votes in for him for Young Player of the Year. But there's times when the Young Player of the Year is a difficult one, and there's also times when, difficult because there's not many candidates, and there's also times when it's difficult because there's quite a few. And this year there could be quite a few. I think Oran Casey down at Cliftonville has had a very good season as well.
Indeed. Well, like I said, I will keep an eye on that as we go along. Stuart, great to have you on once again. In case people have missed it, where can they find all of your online musings and more?
Well, we just need to go on read the Belfast Telegraph, read the Sunday Life, buy the paper, subscribe online. I'm not saying it's all me, but there's good quality stuff on there, and we'll try and keep people as up to date and as abreast of everything as we possibly can. And we will continue to enjoy the rest of the season when there's so much going on. We're a small country, a small league, but it's an exciting league.
Very much so as we approach all the fun parts of our fine league. Stuart, absolutely delight to chat to you again. Until next time, cheerio.
Thank you, Peter. All the best.
I'm pretty sure I gave you a queer bit of bang for your buck this week. We talked about the final, we talked about all the games, as well as all the news rumbling around the clubs. I think that's a good deal. Even better than Windsor's 4 pints for more money than it costs to buy 4 pints individually. I know It was still a mistake, but it was funny all the same. Guys, thank you very much for listening. If you're new here or you've been about here for a while, I appreciate it. It's nice to actually do this bit while my voice is not croaking or falling away, and it means that I can say to all you fine people that one of the nice things that you can do for me as well as you is to subscribe or to follow this podcast via your podcast platform, be it maybe Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you go to like the homepage, the main page of the Kick and Match podcast, there'll be a little place there for you to go ping and select to subscribe or follow the podcast. It's free, and it means you get a little notification every time a new episode pops up on your feed. Like I said, if you're new here, it's weekly, so it comes at you pretty quickly. So thanks for checking us out. Also, thank you, which I'm sure you've done. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's at Kicking Match on all of them. And of course, you can also take this hands-free. Your smart speaker will play the latest episode if you just ask it to play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. It's getting good. It's getting fun. I'll see you next time. Cheers.